Training for Mount Kilimanjaro does not need to be complicated, but it does need to be intentional. In this video, I'm going to take you through the 3 most important things that you need to think about when you're preparing to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Those 3 things are going to be your cardiovascular capacity and how altitude affects you, building up the appropriate strength and endurance for the multi-day trip, as well as the most important one is getting down from the mountain, which is where most people actually run into issues and injuries. If you're interested in climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, the first thing to know is that it's actually not that technical of a climb and it's more of a hike. That being said, it definitely shouldn't be underestimated because you are at really high altitudes and you're going for multiple days, somewhere between 5 and 8 days. If you see my other video on altitude specifically, you'll know that I'm recommending the 8-day option as it helps you acclimate better. So when we start to talk about the cardiovascular demands of this trip, the most important thing to note is that yes, you need a big cardiovascular base, but also how that altitude is going to play into your cardiovascular training. So while having a big cardio base, so that zone 2 base is important, if you've looked into a lot on how altitude affects climbers, you'll realize that in itself will not solve your altitude problems for you. You also need to think about how many days you want to do this trip over. But more importantly, for managing that altitude, it's not just the cardiovascular base, but your cardiovascular efficiency. And where we build up our cardiovascular efficiency is really going to be with breath work so that we can become, one, we have a big gas tank. So think of cardio base as your gas tank, but think of your efficiency of breathing through breath work as making that car that you're driving more efficient. So cardiovascular base, getting out for runs, bikes, hikes, all are going to be important. You do need to build up a relatively big base that way, but adding in breath work is going to take that altitude piece out of the equation a little bit more for you so that you can enjoy that hike. With your cardiovascular base, it's not just about going out and putting on lots of mileage, but more so it's about time on feet. When you look at the actual breakdown on the hike, you're not putting on that many kilometers each day, but you will find it takes you significantly more time to accomplish those kilometers because you're at such high altitude. So think training-wise, more time on feet than actual distance that you're covering. So as you're building up your training, you're actually going to be doing it more based on the time on your feet versus the distance or the altitude that you're covering, because the actual terrain isn't that difficult on the hike. It's more that you're going to be moving so slowly because of the altitude. And because of that altitude, you're going to accumulate a lot of fatigue. 1, there's less oxygen available to you, but 2, just moving slowly for long periods of time, you're likely going to eat less than normal, not be sleeping as well. So you have to start to think about managing that fatigue. So a great way to train for that is to go out back-to-back days and start the accumulation of fatigue on your legs, on your feet, and getting less sleep than normal so that once you get to Kilimanjaro, it doesn't feel that jarring for your body to be in that situation. So now that we have a better understanding about the cardiovascular demands and the importance of breath work for managing the altitude, and that time on feet is key with your cardiovascular training, let's switch over and talk about our strength and endurance component of the training for Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, when it comes to building up the strength and endurance that you're going to need for doing something like Mount Kilimanjaro, it's not so much about building up massive leg strength to carry a heavy pack like you might have to for other multi-day hikes, because on Mount Kilimanjaro, you're almost always going to have porters that are going to be carrying a lot of that weight for you. So you're just going to be managing a small day pack. So really what you need is to have the endurance within your muscles, again, for those very long days versus being able to handle a lot of weight in your pack. Now, there certainly are some steeper sections to this trail that are going to challenge your legs, but overall, think more about endurance and efficiency of your movement. When I was out doing Mount Kilimanjaro, the people that I saw that struggled the most were actually kind of larger, stronger looking people, but they didn't have the efficiency and the endurance with their muscles. So once you mixed in altitude with that, those were the ones that struggled the most. So how this actually translates over to you in your training is think about having longer gym sessions with higher repetitions versus doing more traditional kind of strength-based work for this trip. If anything, what I think is very common with people is that they will overtrain that strength component, and as a result, they're beating up their body and they'll end up with injuries on this trail that bother them more so than the lack of strength. So instead of strength, think, hey, is my body moving really well? And am I going to be able to avoid injuries even on those long, grueling days? Which brings me to my last point of this video, and that is the downhill portion after you've actually summited. Right up until that last high camp, the trail isn't that difficult for someone who's already a pretty intermediate to advanced type hiker. That summit day, though, is going to be a very difficult day for a couple of reasons. One, the altitude. Two, the lack of sleep, because you're going to be getting into camp, get a couple hours of sleep, and then you're going to be waking up around midnight for your summit attempt. It's very steep uphill on that last bit. And then once you're already fatigued, you have to come back down that, get back to that main camp, and then drop down even further to your next camp. So that day is a very big day, and that's why you have to build up that endurance in your muscles to handle all of that downhill. This is where it gets really hard on people's knees, and I saw the most problem. What adds to that is that once we get into that kind of second last and last day, you get into some rainforest, which is also going to be very slippery. So if you've already fatigued yourself on that loose kind of shaly rock of the top of the mountain, and then you're adding in that slipperiness, and it is a recipe for injuries for people. With that being said, probably the most important thing that you can take away from this video is that you need to train for the downhills and injury prevention on your knees. So if you have weak knees, a lot of people are going to be thinking, hey, I need step ups, lunges. They're definitely right in the sense that you need to be training single leg movements instead of both legs, so like a squat. But what's missing is having control of that eccentric portion where you're lowering yourself back down, which is going to replicate downhill hiking for you. And if you kind of follow that basic framework for the months leading up to your Kilimanjaro trip, I think you're going to have a lot more success and a lot more enjoyable of a trip. So remember to recap those. Cardio-wise, we're thinking time on feet and efficiency of our breathing. When we're talking strength and endurance, we're thinking more on that endurance side of like, can I put long days in the mountains and not have little tweaks and nagging injuries pop up? And lastly, do I have control of my body and can prevent knee pain on the downhills once I'm very fatigued? If you have all three of those wrapped up, then the last piece is the taper leading up to and the travel time to get to Mount Kilimanjaro. Most of us are going to have a bit of travel to get to Mount Kilimanjaro, and the most important piece there at this point is you're not going to build anything at that point. It's all going to be about maintaining your body, making sure that you're not going in stiff and achy from your flight. So getting some time in just before you leave, taper in that last week or two, do less hikes, less training so that your body's feeling really fresh for the hike itself. Get lots of sleep leading up to it, and then try and give yourself at least a day once you get to Tanzania to kind of prepare your body, get over your jet lag, and just spend that day moving, doing some mobility, some stretching. Ideally, I would tell people, bring a little lacrosse ball with you so that you can work out a couple of those hot spots that pop up on your travels to Tanzania so that on day one, you're ready to go and you feel great. And if you follow this training advice, you're going to be able to arrive in Tanzania feeling healthy, prepared, confident, and ready to conquer the mountain and have the best possible opportunity to summit. If you enjoyed this video and got value from it, make sure you're subscribed so you can get more hiking specific content.